Can you hear me? I'm talking, but I've got it on. But I think he's driving it.
Yeah. So is this working?
Yes.
It is. Neil, this is Denise in the north. Can you let me know if you can hear us and if you're ready for us?
We can hear you. Thanks. We are here and ready to go.
Great. Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our presenter today, Daryl Rogers. First, I'd like to acknowledge the country on which we are meeting and from where those are joining us online. So I take this moment to reflect upon and acknowledge the deep history, ancestorship and continuing care for our lands, our waterways and seas to which we are all connected. A connection that encompasses our people, our customs, language, spirituality, cultural practices, protocols and continuing sustenance. I acknowledge elders, past and present, and the legacy they provide for enduring custodianship, care and wisdom. I acknowledge members of our community present today online. In the north, we are meeting at the conjunction of three rivers, the Cunnamulla, the Lakakella and the Plipatumala, where for generations, tribes from across northern Tasmania met to share stories, knowledges, dance, song and exchange gifts. This land and these waterways carry our ancestors' spirit. Their presence and their deep knowledges within and from country continue to guide us daily. Acknowledging the fullness of our histories, our people and our culture provides space for collectively embracing truth-telling, openness, healing and reparation, and a future that embraces all forms of diversity, inclusivity and equity. Thank you. So let me introduce Daryl Rogers. Daryl's work has been shown extensively across the world, including Times Square, New York City, Loop, Barcelona, FACT UK, Vivid Sydney, Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, to name just a few, as well as being recognised through numerous art prizes and major events. Daryl's work has been collected publicly and privately, nationally and internationally. Daryl has also produced video art clips for the likes of Midnight Oil. But I would like to speak to Daryl, the person. I recently had opportunity to work with Daryl on a project with a local Tasmanian Aboriginal artist, and I have observed his work from afar as he works with many artists from across Tasmania. And it is this aspect of Daryl and his work that prompted an invitation for him to speak to us about his practice. A quietly insightful, respectful and inspirational creative, Daryl has capacity to work across all genres, negotiate incredible complexity and stay true to the collective vision in an unparalleled manner. And I wish to truly acknowledge that quality. Daryl has generously made time from his extraordinarily demanding schedule to join us today to share insight into his increasingly collaborative practice with artists, arts organisations, and in particular, Aboriginal creatives. I thank you, Daryl, for giving your time and I welcome you. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. And thanks for that acknowledgement. That was amazing. I do just want to acknowledge that we are on Palawa land here. I live only a few streets that way, and this whole area was once a tea tree forest where the Palawa for 60,000 years carried out culture, hunted and lived and survived and thrived in this space. So I just really want to acknowledge that this is a very important area, and one of my works actually speaks to that. One of the works I've worked with some Aboriginal artists on speaks to that. So Yeah, so this work, this presentation, I guess, is called Collaborations and Intersections. At one stage, I was going to call it Collisions. Working collaboratively is a wonderful thing. It's amazing. And it gives me so much inspiration, but often it's paved with, complexity that brings about, friction, and also brings about, issues that you have to resolve through the process of making art. So, see if this works. No, let's see if this works. It's not working, yeah. Okay, thanks. Right. Okay, good, great. I actually did an honours here nearly 13 years ago now, and I did it and came out of it basically working with video. This verse from T.S. Eliot's poem, The Four Quartets, has become quite a central feature of how I think about what I do. It basically speaks to a lot of thematics that I am really interested in. It has vibration for me towards a spiritual thing, quantum mechanics, and also deep time. Working with a lot of Palawa artists, I'm always just amazed at the extent of the culture that was and is still here. And I'm always, I sort of come back to this quite regularly, and even on a work just very recently, this image here was a work that I have just completed. It's amazing how it at one point I was talking to Dave Goff and just went, oh, this just reminds me of this verse. So anyhow, I just wanted to put it up there because it is very important to me in my practice. So before I did this art thing, for many, many years, I was doing lots of other things. I started as a theatre designer in Brisbane. I worked on a number of theatre shows. I was an actor, I was a tour manager, and I found myself designing a lot of theatre sets for a number of projects. And I think that was sort of the beginning of where this idea of collaboration came from. That developed into being an art director and production designer on TV commercials, short films and television. And again, working in film is a very highly collaborative process. So I became very aware of how important it is to be very open and able to work alongside other creatives and work in tandem with them without becoming overtaking, or, to work alongside and supportive of that process. That led to working on some expo pavilions. So I'm really old, and I worked at Expo 88 as a young designer and maker in 1988 in Brisbane. It was an amazing experience. And so I got to actually create some pretty amazing big projects. That moved into developing a company around that whole process. And we, over the next 30 years, I worked with a number of tourist attractions, museums, interpretive centres across Australia. And the idea of storytelling became very central to my work and what I was about. And I became very interested in what is this storytelling process about? How do we tell stories? What's the essence of story and that sort of thing? Which led to becoming a television producer. I worked in making animation, documentary series and short films for the likes of the ABC, SBS, and I worked for a number of the commercial channels as well. So in all of that, collaboration was very important. And as a producer, I became very aware that when you're working on a project with writers and directors, you have to make sure that everybody is on the same, has the same vision, because if even they're, 1 or 2 degrees out with the vision, over time that vision starts to separate and becomes quite, it doesn't work. The project tends to fall apart. So as a producer, I realized that you have to keep everybody on track, and you have to work together to make sure that everybody's vision is, on that same track. So the only way I can actually talk about all this is to talk about the work that I've done. So I've produced this little graphic here to try to break down and go through some of the projects, and hopefully give you guys some idea of how these things came about, what they were, and why they exist, I think is probably my thinking. On the left-hand side, yeah, is a lot of the First Nations projects that I've worked on collaboratively. And on the right-hand side, I work with a tech art collective called Somalumia. Somalumia started in 2015. There's 2 other founders of Somalumia, James Riggle and Troy Merritt. Both of these guys are very capable technologists. James actually teaches here, both Troy and James teach here as teaching in the area of technology and also entrepreneurship. So we formed Somalumia with an idea that we would try to bring technology and art together in a very interesting way, and actually bring technology into the art making as a medium, I guess is how I see it. So I'll start up on the right-hand side and actually talk to the Somalumia projects pretty quickly, and then I'd just like to talk about the First Nations projects, and there's a few other bits and pieces in there which I'll try to unpack as well. So back in 2019, actually 2018, I went over to the Tarkine rainforest, Takina, and I was invited over there with what was then called Art for Tarkine in Motion, which is now called Art for Takina. And I actually didn't have any idea of what I was doing when I was over there, but I actually took a 360 VR camera with me and wandered off into the rainforest and got lost several times with my VR camera, and just shot lots and lots of 360 VR footage of the Tarkine, because I had been over for a couple of times before. Was pretty amazed at that whole experience, at that whole level of understanding of what the destruction of that rainforest is what destruction is happening in that rainforest, but also the spiritual and environmental benefits of rainforest. When I came back, we sat down, Somalumia sat down, and we talked about this idea. We'd done a preliminary work at Sawtooth. In those days, Sawtooth, and even now, is a very important ARI in Launceston. And we created this work called, I can't even remember what the work was called. Anyhow, it had a Tarkine relationship. It was using projectors and LED lights, but out of that grew this idea where we wanted to create a sense of being in the rainforest, but try to speak to it in terms of how speak to the destruction that is happening there in terms of the logging. We had no idea that this might have evolved into a collaboration, but Brian Ritchie, the then curator of Mona Foma, rang me one day after we'd pitched the project to Mona Foma and said, "How would you like to work with Jim Magini from Midnight Oil to do the soundtrack?" And I sort of took a breath and had to think about that, and I literally waited 20 seconds and went, "Yeah, that could work," So we actually got to work with Jim Majidi. Jim did this amazing soundtrack for this VR work. The work basically is you walk into a room, which is actually a projected image of the rainforest on 3 walls. You put on VR headsets and you're in the rainforest. And for the next 3 to 5 minutes, you're in the rainforest and you're hearing this soundtrack, and slowly it sounds like it's Jim playing guitar, but the guitars become more and more raucous. They sound like chainsaws. They sound like bulldozers. Jim just did this amazing soundtrack, and it's binaural. So as you turn around, the soundtrack is all around you, and you're actually creating the work as you're in that VR experience. And when you take the headsets off, the projection around you has transformed into a logged rainforest. So you are immediately understanding, and it is the rainforest that you're in that is logged. So that was the experience that I had. I actually had to go back and record the logged rainforest once we got the go-ahead on this project, and that was pretty devastating in a way, but the work is really quite powerful. That work has been shown in a number of other places. It went to Houston in the USA. It's been to the Hive up in Ulverston. It's really quite amazing work. The next year we then got to do a really different work. Back in 2016, Troy and I created the Pennyroyal Dark Ride for the Pennyroyal. Inside the Dark Ride, there's 35 projectors and 200 computers driving the Dark Ride. And Troy came to me one day and said, wouldn't it be great if we created an art ride, an art experience? And we turned off all the Dark Ride experience, and we turned it into a sort of like a psychedelic experience. So we pitched that to Mona Foma. Brian loved the idea. And so he said, how would you like to work with Robin Fox? And I thought, okay, let's do that. That was another great experience. I don't know if you know Robin Fox, but he's a laser artist that works across the world. We also got to work with Melbourne Electronic Sound Studio, who did the soundtrack to the project. Again, we had a sound system that was just extensive through the whole Dark Ride, and it became a psychedelic art experience like you wouldn't believe. Also, we brought in Ash Bird, who was a friend of mine from doing the course here, and Jess Dorloff. And that was, again, a collaborative experience that was just out of this world. The ride was just a blast, and it was just a lot of fun, really. There was no real deep meaning to it other than just going on an amazing ride. The next work, Lacune, was a response to COVID. This was, 2020. 2020. We produced this work in February 2021. And what we decided was we wanted to create a work that actually was separated everybody. And we wanted to really think about what is this online experience of us communicating with each other? How does that work? How can we bring more to that experience in some way, shape or form? So we deliberately chose 3 sites across Launceston, a church hall, a shop front, and the foyer of the Earl Arts Centre in the Princess Theatre. And we created a dance interactive work where you literally dance with other people in those other 3 spaces. Ian Chia is one of my regular composer collaborators. He's a great friend, but he's an amazing artist in his own right. He's worked with the likes of Bjork and a whole bunch of people. So he's really quite good. And he's also a really good technologist. And that work was quite successful. It's gone on to be shown at Illuminate in Adelaide. We just had about a 5-month season at QV Mag where we created a slightly larger work where it was a 3-screen work. We linked both the Royal Park site and the Inverest site together. We actually this particular version, we actually linked the three rivers. So I went out and shot lots of footage of the three rivers and then combined them in this 3-screen presentation. And in the process of doing that, the collaborative process has been, Ian has done the soundtrack, but we've also brought in people like, in Adelaide, we worked with the sound artist over there, Jess Bedell, and this particular version, we actually brought in Stompen, and through our rant and RAF, we were able to fund an ability that when you were dancing, you were also dancing with Stompen dancers at the same time, which was quite fun. I'm going to take a glass of water. Soma Lumi had an idea. We've been playing around with these little bits of technology called, I forget what they're called, sorry, but you know, it's tech. I have to admit that I'm not a technologist, and why I work with a lot of these people is they bring something to the work that I don't do. All I know is that, you know, I make videos and I have this background in design and that sort of thing. So working with technologists is, for me, just a joy, because they can do things. You go, what if we did this? And I have no idea what I'm saying, and they go, yeah, we can do that. We can do this or that, and things come together. So it's really, really a valuable collaboration in that when you don't know what you're doing, others do. So this particular work, it was called No Entry While Millers Operating. It started with an idea, very simple idea, where we wanted to create this experience of fireflies. Fireflies in the wild, when there is no light pollution, no noise, their flashing sinks. So they become so there's this universal flashing. But when light pollution happens or there's sort of disturbances, they all go out of sync. And this idea, we kept playing with this idea and thinking about this idea, and it never really eventuated. But we were asked to take over an old pulp mill. The Spring Bay pulp mill had this tunnel where they used to, there was a conveyor belt where the pulp, the tree pulp used to go out to the ships. And we were asked to create a work that actually spoke to the way that nature takes back over once we have gone in and denuded the landscape, that nature always survives, nature always thrives and comes back and takes over. So this work was a site-specific responsive work. We created a number of video sequences, and then we had a whole bunch of LED sequences that we actually ran through this 20-meter long tunnel. Ian did this amazing soundtrack that actually took an awareness of the echoes in the tunnel and actually worked with those echoes. Another technologist that I work with is Kim Thomas, who is just an amazing young guy that just does amazing bits of, works a lot with LEDs and that sort of thing. And so we did this work, which was, yeah, it's really hard to explain. There is a video. I don't know if the video works. Maybe the video works. No, the video doesn't work. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, the work was only on for 2 hours while they did Nocturna at Beaker Street, did Nocturna at the Spring Bay Mill. So we've never had an opportunity to re-stage that work anywhere, but one day maybe we will. That's a bit of a wide shot of the work. We had an idea again where we wanted to, this idea of collaboration was growing with us, and we started to think about, well, there's something about the notion of technology and art that maybe we could start to explore a bit more with artists that don't use technology in their practices. So we came up with this project idea, and we initially called it Ghost Space, where we would find a non-art location and we would work with an artist that didn't work with technology in their practice. And I knew Samantha Dennis through my days at Sawtooth. I've always been really respectful of her practice. She again has been through and is doing I think she's doing a PhD in here now. And we got funding thanks to RANT to basically just explore this idea. Sam has this practice that works with jewelry, but also with museum collections. So together we sort of came up with this idea of talking about acclimatization societies. Acclimatization societies was this group of people in the late 1800s that came together and wanted to make Tasmania a little bit more like home, like England. And so they brought lots of animals and lots of plants from England here to make them feel happier. And as you know, all of those species now have become invasive and are doing damage to the environment in many, many ways. So we did this work and we staged it at Franklin House, which is the historic home out at Youngtown. And we created a work that actually tried to speak to this acclimatization society. So over a period of time, this dining room table has a cloche on it, and inside the cloche, there are wasps. And around the dining room, on the dining room table, there are traces through Sam's sculptures of foxglove and gorsebush. And the table slowly becomes engrossed in thorns and root systems and all sorts of things, and it just becomes this new work. But it's a very simple work, but it has this very evocative and atmospheric, immersive feeling. Finally, I think in the Soma Lumia canon so far, we did a Vestigia Arborum. It's always hard to say that word. A work again where we worked with Jim Magini. I rang Jim and said, how would you like to do a new work? And we went to Botanica in Brisbane, where we took over a Moreton Bay fig tree. Moreton Bay fig tree is these huge, beautiful trees. I grew up in Brisbane, so it was like going home. And the work, the theme of Botanica was tread lightly. So, and the idea was we wanted to talk about nature and the fact that we really need to be caring and considerate of it. So what we did was we created a work which actually had projections on a tree, and then Kim did this amazing LED screen, which was 20 meters wide by about 6 meters high on both sides of the tree, using his LED lights that he has. And we created a work that actually read the amount of Bluetooth signals in the area. So the more people that came to the work and actually looked at the work changed. And so it got more angry and it got more chaotic. So the video that I produced was sort of got this really quite sort of demonstrative effect. And as people left, it calmed down and became more passive. So you had to pick the times when you came along to see it. We had 130,000 people come to see it through that festival. So it was pretty amazing. And it became one of the features of the whole festival. So yeah, it was a pretty exciting work. So I'll just go back. So that's sort of the Soma Lumia work that I've done. I'll talk to now the First Nations work and try to unpack some of these so that I hope that I can give you some understanding. I sort of was trying to figure out what it is that, you know, people want to hear about what I do. And I guess it's sort of, you know, how do these things come about and why do they come about? So I hope that I'm actually speaking to some of those things. The very first work is Tami Ningina, Never Seeded. day, I was invited to a meeting by the then curator, Ashley Watling, to talk with Dave Goff and Vicky West. And we talked about taking over the stairwell of QV Mag. And it was just so exciting to sit down with those two and actually start to think about what we could do there. And the museum sits on a tea tree forest that once was here. The whole of this area was a tea tree forest. I don't know if anybody lives here. I live here, and if you are aware, as you drive over as you hear trucks driving over the ground, the whole of this space vibrates. We are sitting on a swamp of tea tree forest, and it's amazing. And what we wanted to do was to talk to that, to say that that building's only been there for, 100 years, but that tea tree forest has been there for so much longer, and the people that lived and thrived in that area have been there for so much longer. So, no, it's not going to work. I'm going to have to. Coming in. So initially it was going to be a projection work, because what we wanted to do, the very first thing that Dave talked about was actually projecting over the portrait of Queen Vic with a tea tree forest. And it was such an exciting, when we talk about these things, I just get so inspired by those sorts of ideas that he wanted to smoke her out. And so the idea was that we were going to project into that space. And what I quickly realized that was going to be just way too complicated and difficult. And so what we came up with, the idea was to essentially put 13 4K 65-inch TV screens into that space as if they're windows into what was once there. So we essentially poking holes in the wall. And then we worked together, Vicky, Dave and I, on recording culture. So we went in and we shot in a space here at QV Mag where we sorry about the soundtrack. We basically going apple rocks, making spearheads, and then making a fire stick. And over the 30-minute video, we created essentially a story of culture, but also of country in a very slow way. And when I say slow, what we were trying to do is give a sense of the 60,000-year experience of that, what was going on there. The work actually revolves. I don't know if anybody has seen this work, but if you stand there long enough, the work actually revolves all the way around you. Dave and I went out into the tea tree forest. We found a tea tree forest up in Devonport, where we walked into the forest and we had to go back 3 times to get the right shot. It was not easy because I had to get it so slow, because they were very concerned that if it went too fast, people would fall over in the stairwells, which was a possibility. So the work revolves. Dave had been walking through the forest sometime before and found 3 mangana feathers, yellowtail black cockatoo. Sorry, I only know them by mangana now. And we put them in trees, and Dave put his ochre hand on a tree, and it was one of those moments where Dave and I were just standing there recording, and it was just, we started to talk about quantum physics, weirdly, and it was just one of those moments where in making art, you go, this moment is just so powerful. I was standing there with Dave, and I don't know, it's very hard to describe those experiences where something comes together and you go, I don't know what I'm making here, but this is going to be great. So, and the work, I'm so proud of that work, and Vicky and Dave being, working alongside Vicky and Dave to make that work was just amazing. There was 14 individual videos had to be made that were all 30 minutes long. So the editing process was mind-boggling. I had to think about how do I actually edit all of those videos so that they're revolving around, and I have to bring in, at every point, there's a process where you see the fire stick being made, so it moves down the walls in different scenes. Vicky doing her weaving happens at another point, the smoking, the napping, all of those things had to be thought about over that 30-minute period. So it was really complex, but really quite successful and enjoyable. And then, so for me, I'm not always the collaborator. I'm actually just working in support of Palawa artists. So Vicky came to me and said she's doing a project at TMAG for a big First Nations project that they were producing down there. And she wanted to do a work where she brought stone tools to life and made them dance. And so we talked about it, and I came back with an idea that basically we built a Perspex table and had a projector mounted in the ceiling at TMAG. And then we projected images of sky country, land and sea country onto the stone tools. And over a period of time, those develop into being all smoking video presentation. So they have this sort of dancing quality, and some beautiful things happen which we didn't, necessarily plan on, where the projection of the shadow of the tool hit the floor, and that became quite a powerful sort of way that the tool had its own shadow. And that's, it was, again, very simple work, but it was really quite an engaging work. So, sorry about the video, this is just me shooting on the phone. Okay, so this is actually going back to Soma Lumia, but this was another key work that I've had the experience of working on. Way back, funnily enough, when we were doing Takina Anthracene Blues, it was actually in that building over there. We were next door to TasDance, who were doing a performance, and they came across, and we hadn't really met them before, and they said, how would you like to work on a new work together? And we went, yeah, sure, that'd be great. That was 2019. And so we were invited to work with Pakana Kanaplila. That's a Hobart-based First Nations dance group headed by Cinsa Mansell. Ourselves, TasDance, and there was also Skinny Fish, which is a music producer from the Northern Territory. And over 2 years, we worked together on several residencies together at TasDance. And because of COVID, didn't get to do the project in the year that we were supposed to do it. But eventually we got to produce the work at the Theatre Royal in Hobart. This work is, and I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day again, but this work again was just one of those projects where you sit in awe of the honour of working alongside Aboriginal artists to bring a story to life that is just speaks to such a beautiful and amazing, powerful culture and people. So this work, you know, I brought, there was so much that I brought to the work, I guess, in terms of my theatre design, the technology that we had employed in the project, because there was a tracking camera where we actually tracked the movement of dancers. And then we had 5 projectors, I think, projecting onto four projectors, 3 onto the background and 1 onto the floor. So see if I can play some of the work here. I'll scrub through to get some of the interesting scenes. There was animation, so and then we used the projections in such a way that actually we used a lot of shadow play, which was really quite interesting. I'll scrub through because I think I'm starting to run out of time. And this was the sorry, I'll jump back. There was just one other piece I wanted to show you. Doesn't want to work properly. I think there was a track movement creating actions on the back screen, which was again a really interesting process. And then finally there was this amazing scene which grew out of, the whole project grew out of just us doing residencies and experimenting with ideas. So the projections of shadows and those sorts of things were almost accidents where people were walking behind the screens and going, oh, that looks interesting. So we had country growing out of shadows. And then at a certain point, we created this whole scene of the ancestors coming back and being part of that scene. So I videoed through green screen the dancers, but we put them in different attire, in skins and ochres and then a whole bunch of other ways. And then we brought those ancestors back and we told that story through that way. It was amazing. Then I worked again with Dave this March in 23 on Marpoli. I don't know if you know Marpoli, but Dave has over the last 6 years produced Marpoli for 10 Days on the Island. And this year we were able to produce, I was brought in to do the video content and the site. We created a way bigger site for the project, and Ian Chia was brought in to do an amazing soundtrack. So, sorry, I've left his name off there. Bad boy. But anyhow, yeah, so Marpoli was quite amazing. I threw this in because I thought it might be interesting. In all of the projects I work on, what I find when working with Palawa artists is it's very important to be very sensitive and consultative at every point. It's so important to me to make sure I'm not getting ahead or going off on a tangent. If you remember, the producer thing in my head is always making sure that I'm on the same track and that I'm not seeing something they're not. So storyboarding for me is a very important process in the process of making all of these projects. So I will sit and storyboard to whatever extent that I need to. Going back to the stairwell work, that was storyboarded, and I sat with Vicky and Dave. I even produced, which I didn't show here, but I produced a 3D model of the stairwell and actually had the screens in the stairwell so that they understood exactly what the work was about. So in this particular one, first of all, I designed the site. So my theatre design capacity comes in really helpful a lot. So I use SketchUp, very basic program, but I was able to show Dave how, and 10 Days on the Island, what this site might look like. At a certain point, I also designed these stingrays. We took over these, the kayak guy down here at the river generously put his kayaks into the show, and we built 6 gigantic stingrays that had LEDs on them, and they came across the river at one point in the Marpley show. So, so I created this. So the storyboarding process is really important. So I wanted to show you that, to show you that the process is always really slow. You have to make sure that you are keeping in time with the other artists in the process. And that works with both Soma Lumia and with First Nations artists, but particularly here to make sure that they are agreeing and in tune with what you are making with them. And then this is where Denise and I sort of collided. This work was just another work which really challenged me to some degree, because Cheryl Rose, through Denise, Cheryl and Denise were doing this work at the NGV. Cheryl was producing this 5-metre long drawing of her country up at Rocky Cape, and she was creating this work that spoke to her memories of growing up around Rocky Cape, her family, her ancestors that lived and, again, thrived in that area. And so they brought me in to create this other layer of the work, a digital layer. And the process was really interesting because, first of all, we couldn't actually put the whole drawing up anywhere to actually understand what we were seeing. So we used a temporary drawing or a template. But previous to that, I actually took some photos of the work and then was able to digitally manipulate images. I went up to Rocky Cape with Cheryl and we went out on country one day and we shot a whole lot of grass trees. It was primarily grass trees because that was her strongest memory of that area. It's real, there's a lot of them. And they have this really mesmerizing movement to them. And so what Cheryl wanted was to actually overlay those grass trees onto the drawing so that the drawing had this digital dimension. So the challenge was, how do I do that with a projector in a gallery, in a national gallery? So we got together twice, I think, Denise, Cheryl and myself at the Hive, where we set the work up and we played around with the projector and the images that I had produced. Oh, there's lots of them. They should be there, but as the work's coming up, you'll see images of Cheryl's family just
slowly fading up and fading away. And it's that beautiful notion that memories are fleeting, that they're there, sort of. So the work was speaking to this experience of family, country, memory. And thankfully, it seemed to work pretty well at the NGV. I never got to see it in person, but I did see some video of the work. But it was a really amazing experience. And yeah, hopefully I did the work proud.
And our latest work is Tequila Milethina tea. This is epic. It's a work where it actually grew out of the work. It's in the stairwell. I don't know what time it is. I should. I grew out of the work in the stairwell, and it. I was standing outside one day with Dave, and I said, "What are we going to do next, Dave?" And he said, "I've got this idea of bringing a Glover painting to life, because Glover always put, or often put, Aboriginal people back into his paintings even after they'd been moved off country." And so we started on this journey. We were funded by Creative Australia and Arts Tasmania to create what became a 24-minute planetarium work. We worked in partnership with The Hive, who have the biggest planetarium in Tasmania, and it's an amazing 4K planetarium. And thanks to people like Bruce Moyle, who's sitting right here, and Ian, we created just an amazing experiential, immersive work in a planetarium. And Serena Rosevier, who's another artist that I worked on the project, she took this shot, and we were always quite amazed at the sort of the similarity.
The fire,
The
dance,
vision is actually
the fire and the spirit. Ancestors come dance around and protect us.
As part of it,
We good, our heart in country.
This is how it tends to look, if it'll work. So there's your dome, and the work revolves around you, and you're inside that dome. So Dave's idea was that he wanted an audience to sit in the middle of that experience of Aboriginal people and modern day Aboriginals. So we start the work, they're in their normal clothes, and as the work goes on, they ochre up, they put their skins on, they go out and they hunt, and then at a certain point, and this is the ultimate part of the film, is they get to dance with their ancestors. Their ancestors come and stand with them, and at the very end of the film, their ancestors are there and they're with them and they're dancing, and it's just the most joyous experience. It really is joyful. And Ian's soundtrack is to die for. It's just amazing. So yeah. I won't talk to any more because I'm out of time. But I was going to talk a little bit about my theatre experience, but I don't need to. So I think we're doing questions. Yeah. Sorry, that was very quick. I hope it's okay.
Did anyone have a question? She's in the south. I'd like to make a comment.
I found that absolutely fantastic. Just blew me away. And thank you. It just blew me away, and I just had no idea that people like you were around and creating such incredible experiences for people. And First Nations are so important to us, and hopefully one day we will realise how they were the most fantastic custodians of this world, of this land here, and that we have so much to learn from them. And I think that your pieces, your collaborative pieces, have really immersed people in their life and given them a first-hand experience of what it might have been like to have been an Indigenous person on this land. So thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
There's a
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thank you very much, Daryl. Just a comment. I mean, apart from Dave's Lumi performances, which by their very nature engage directly with thousands of people, the thing that I'm left with is the thought that so much of what you've outlined is really quite literally transformational work. You hear this word used a lot, it's overused, but these are transformational works because they demonstrate and they empower and they give permission to ordinary everyday people who have to be part of the solution, otherwise they're part of the problem, demonstrates that ordinary everyday Tasmanians, Australians, people throughout the colonised world, settler colonials, can actually engage with contemporary First Nations culture and be part of it and celebrate it and have it as part of their own life experience and creative practice. A lot of people think it's too hard. We can't go there. Too afraid of making mistakes or doing the wrong thing. This is really empowering, and I wish that we could get 400,000 people in Tasmania to have sat in on your show, on your presentation today. What does that amount to? We need to do better, I think, as a community, as a state, as an industry, to capture and share this sort of achievement. And it's not just you, but you're a good example of the sort of things that are achievable. And we just somehow or another need to stop keeping this a secret so that lots and lots and lots of people, and the obvious way to do that, I suspect, is probably through schools as a start.
going to keep making it. Part of my job, I think, what I would like to see is actually more First Nations people doing what I do and able to bring these stories to life. And part of my, my hope is that, by doing what we're doing, we're inspiring them to get to do that. Yeah. So.
Good. I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, it's 1 o'clock.
So look, unless there are more questions, I'd really like everybody to give a resounding thank you to Daryl. And yeah, I'm very proud that I've had opportunity to work with you. As I said, it takes a particular individual with the qualities that you just seem to have naturally. And it's been an honour to work with you, Daryl, and thank you for being here today. You're just a damn good bloke. Thank you.